In this Process Simulator Professional training video, we will introduce you to subroutines. Subroutines are a method to reuse logic within Process Simulator. They're similar to Process Simulator macros, which allow for values to be substituted throughout a model. Subroutines, however, allow you to create logic or code in one place and then call those lines of logic with a call of the subroutine from anywhere within your model. So let me show you where we define the logic. If we come into our advanced elements, you can see we have all the different tabs, the different types of model elements. If we go to subroutines, we can give our subroutine a name. So I will just call this one sub display, because this example will just show a simple display statement. So I can give it a name, and in future videos we'll show you about the return type and passing parameters. But the basic implementation of a subroutine just requires a name and then some lines of logic in the logic section. We'll come back and define the lines of logic in a minute. So if my name here is sub display, then if I come into one of my activity boxes here, I can create logic that will call that subroutine. So if I say, I'll just do freeform logic here. So at A1, if I want it to use whatever logic is in that subroutine, I would just say sub display open and close parentheses. So this will call the logic in the subroutine. The logic in the subroutine will be executed, and then any additional lines of logic that are here at activity A1 will be processed after that. I can come to A2 and I can paste that same logic in there, and I'll do it again at maybe A3, and we can do it here at shipping too. So I'm calling the same lines of logic from each of these 4 activity boxes. Now, right now, if I run the model, there is no logic in that subroutine, so nothing different would happen in my model. But if I come into my subroutine and I say, let's go to my logic here, I can again define it either with builder logic or freeform. I will do this as freeform. You can see that we can have our activity logic, like the ship out logic for the highlighted activity, displayed right next to my subroutine logic if I want it. So for my subroutine, we're just going to make this just a simple statement that will be display, and we'll just use syntax for the display statement. So I can just say entity processing and quotation marks, and then if I use the $, that's the concatenate symbol that we use in freeform logic to concatenate and have it show me the value for an entity call, as well as I want to know which activity is processing at. So this will just be a string that'll say at activity, and it will actually evaluate which activity is calling it by using the location syntax there. So my overall statement here is display, then the string entity processing, then it'll give me the value and show me the name of whatever entity it is that's processing there. Then another string will say add activity, and it will show me which activity it's processing at. So the options there, I'm calling it from these 4 different activities, will be add activity A1 or A2 or A3, and my list of entities, they were over here on the side, I'll have B1, B2, or B3 processing through one of these different activities. So let's just go ahead and run it and see what happens. Now you see the first display statement comes up and it says entity processing is B1 at activity A1. So that's this red one here at A1. I'll hit OK. Then the subroutine is again called from A2, and it tells me that it's processing entity B2 at that activity. And then B3 is at activity 3. And we get B1 here at my ship out. And I could just keep hitting OK, and it will show me every step of the way which entity is at which activity dynamically. So that was one line of code in a subroutine that is being called from different activities. And because that code incorporated, which entity name it was or which location or activity it's calling it from, that's being evaluated as though I had copied and pasted that subroutine code right into my activity logic code here. Now, if you're not familiar with the display statement, you can sit here and click OK every time the prompt comes up, or you can push the Enter key, or if you choose to hit Cancel, it will actually stop your simulation early. I will go ahead and do that. Now, without actually implementing, let me just show you another example that we do in the professional training course where we go through some hands-on exercises with this. In this situation, we have a couple different entities that are flowing through a printing press line. And as I look through here at my properties, I'm calling a custom report subroutine. So at each one of these activities, we're calling the same subroutine. So let's look at what that code for that subroutine might look like. And this one is a little bit longer, because if you recall, with subroutines, we can have multiple lines of code all associated with the same subroutine. So every time one of my activities called sub custom report, it was as though I took all of these lines of logic and pasted it into the operation logic at each of these process steps. So what this logic is doing, it's actually creating a custom report in an array, which will be written out to an Excel file at the end of the simulation run. So if we look at what's happening in this little section of code, we're not going to get into it too deeply here, but I have an attribute that's capturing a process step identifier. We're time-stamping it with a clock statement. We are requesting a resource. Then we're writing a bunch of data to the array. And the name of the array here is Y resource wait stats. And then the row in the array that it writes it to is based on the unique identifier for which entity is calling it. So row 1, column 1, we're just going to put that ID number there. And then column 2 is going to have the name of the activity that we're calling it from. Column 3 will have the elapsed time, and this calculation will be written out to the third column of the array. And then in the fourth column, we will write out to that column the name of the resource that was captured, because we have the option of capturing one of two resources. So this would just be an example of a little more advanced way that we could call a subroutine that then dynamically is populating this with whatever entity information is currently calling that subroutine. So you might have an entity at every single activity in your model, all processing the same subroutine independently of each other. And it's just as though we had copied and pasted this code into each one of the individual activities. One of the great features about this is if we decide we want to change something in here, or maybe we want to add a fifth column or a sixth column, we can come in and change the code right here in one place, and every entity that's calling it at each of the different activities will then process the revised code. So we have one place that we need to change it, and the logic gets updated throughout the entire model. And if you're wondering what that logic looks like, I'll go ahead and just run this model and open up the results. You can see what the results look like. We just have that index number in the first column, the name of the activity that's calling the logic in the second column, what that delay, the response time was from the time the entity requested a resource until that resource actually arrived, and then in the fourth column we have which resource it was, whether it was the copy girl or the copy boy that was able to respond. So that's how an array export like that might look. In future subroutine videos, we'll look at activated subroutines, we will look at passing parameters to subroutines, and we'll look at having subroutines return calculated values. Thanks for joining us.